The year 1965. While American troops were landing in Vietnam and Malcolm X was assassinated in New York, music was undergoing its own revolution. Today, we're diving into the songs that defined this pivotal year in history. Tracks that weren't just entertainment, but the soundtrack to a changing world. Let's explore what made these songs special. The Beach Boys emerged from Hawthorne, California in 1961, founded by the three Wilson brothers, Brian, Dennis, and Carl, along with their cousin Mike Love and friend Al Jardine. While they presented a clean-cut image that parents approved of, the reality behind the scenes was far more turbulent. Their father, Murray Wilson, was notoriously controlling and allegedly abusive, particularly towards Brian Wilson. This family dysfunction created a strange dichotomy between their harmonious sound and their troubled personal lives. Help Me Rhonda became their second #1 hit in 1965, cementing their status as America's band, though the British invasion was in full swing. Today, the Beach Boys' legacy is complicated. Brian Wilson, the musical genius behind their greatest works, struggled with severe mental health issues for decades. He was under the control of controversial psychologist Eugene Landy for years before being freed from that arrangement in the 1990s. Mike Love continues touring under the Beach Boys name, while Brian has pursued solo work. The surviving members have occasionally reunited, most notably for their 50th anniversary in 2012. But old tensions remain unresolved. The band's influence on modern music is immeasurable, with artists from the Beatles to Fleet Foxes citing them as major influences. Interestingly, Help Me Rhonda was recorded twice. The first version appeared on their Today album, but Brian Wilson was dissatisfied with it and brought the band back to record a more polished version for single release. During this second recording session, Murray Wilson showed up uninvited and intoxicated, interrupting the proceedings and criticizing the band's performance. This uncomfortable moment was captured on tape and has since been released, offering a disturbing glimpse into the family dynamics behind America's favorite band. Bob Dylan arrived in New York's Greenwich Village in 1961, an ambitious young man from Hibbing, Minnesota, determined to meet his idol, Woody Guthrie, and make his mark on the folk scene. By 1965, he had already established himself as the voice of the protest movement. But what many fans didn't realize was that Dylan was growing restless with his role as a spokesman of a generation. When he released Like a Rolling Stone in the summer of 1965, it wasn't just a new song. It was a declaration of independence.
Once upon a time, you dressed so fine, through the bumps of dime in your prime.
The track ran an unprecedented 6 minutes when radio was dominated by 3-minute singles and featured electric instruments that his folk purists found unforgivable. His performance of this song at the Newport Folk Festival led to boos and accusations of betrayal from his core audience. Dylan's artistic rebellion paid off dramatically. Like a Rolling Stone reached #2 on the Billboard Hot 100 despite its length, and Columbia Records initially refused to release it as a single. The song has since been recognized as one of the most influential compositions in modern music, with Rolling Stone magazine naming it the greatest song of all time. Dylan himself has remained an enigmatic figure, continuing to tour well into his 80s on what's been called the never-ending tour. He was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature in 2016, a controversial choice that sparked debate about the boundaries between music and literature. Even in his advanced years, Dylan has continued releasing acclaimed original material, including 2020's Rough and Rowdy Ways. Few people know that the distinctive organ part on Like a Rolling Stone was performed by Al Kooper, who wasn't even an organ player. Kooper was a guitarist who had been invited to the session simply to watch. When he heard the song, he convinced producer Tom Wilson to let him play the organ, despite never having played one professionally before. Wilson allowed it, thinking it wouldn't be used in the final mix. Not only did Cooper's improvised organ part make the final cut, but it became one of the most recognizable elements of the song, proving that sometimes musical magic comes from the most unexpected places. I'd love to hear your memories of where you were when you first heard these revolutionary songs. Share your stories in the comments below. Hit that like button if this brings back memories, and subscribe to journey with us through more musical history. If you know someone who lived through this incredible era of music, share this video with them. They'll thank you for the trip down memory lane. Roger Miller started his music career in the early 1950s as a fiddle player in Oklahoma before serving in the United States Army during the Korean War. What many don't know is that Miller was dismissed from the military for his drinking habits, foreshadowing the addiction issues that would plague him throughout his life. After his discharge, he worked as a bellhop at the Andrew Jackson Hotel in Nashville while trying to break into the music industry. The inspiration for King of the Road supposedly came from seeing a no trespassing sign while driving, though Miller later admitted this was partly fabricated to make a better story. The song's portrayal of a carefree hobo lifestyle was somewhat romanticized, given that real-life homelessness in 1965 America was far from glamorous.
Trailer for sale or rent, rooms to let 50 cents.
Despite his country music classification, Miller defied easy categorization. He wrote King of the Road in a single day, and it earned him 13 Grammy nominations in 1965, a record at the time. The song crossed over to pop audiences, reaching number 4 on the Billboard Hot 100 and topping the country charts. Miller's career eventually took an unexpected turn when he wrote the Tony-winning score for the Broadway musical Big River in 1985, based on Mark Twain's Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Sadly, Miller's life was cut short by lung cancer in 1992, but his musical legacy extends far beyond his signature hit, with artists from Johnny Cash to Ringo Starr covering his songs. A little-known fact about King of the Road is that it almost wasn't recorded at all. Miller had written the first verse and chorus, but had put it aside, unfinished. While playing cards with his friends one night, he absent-mindedly began singing the fragment. His friends were so impressed, they urged him to complete it immediately. Miller excused himself, finished writing the song, and returned to play it for them. One of those friends was present at the recording session and can be heard saying, "Hot damn," near the end of the record, a spontaneous reaction that was left in the final mix. The Birds and the Bees by Joel Akens, who wasn't a household name before it became a hit in 1965. Born in Houston, Texas in 1933, Akens started his career singing gospel before transitioning to doo-wop groups in the late 1950s, including the Turks and the Four Dots. What's controversial about the Birds and the Bees is how it managed to slip past censors of the time with its thinly veiled sexual innuendo.
Let me tell you about the birds and the bees and the flowers and the trees.
The seemingly innocent nursery rhyme reference was actually a cheeky nod to sex education, and while it might seem tame by today's standards, it was pushing boundaries for radio play in 1965. The song's success was somewhat of an anomaly in a year dominated by the British invasion and protest songs. After his breakthrough hit, Akens struggled to replicate its success. He released follow-up singles like Georgie Porgy and continued performing, but never again reached the commercial heights of his signature song. He later toured with the Coasters in the 1970s and continued performing at oldie shows until his death in 2013 at the age of 79. Many music historians consider Akens a classic one-hit wonder, though his impact on pop culture through that single hit remains significant. The song has been featured in numerous films and TV shows over the decades, ensuring that even generations born long after 1965 recognize its catchy melody. What many don't realize, though, is that The Birds and the Bees wasn't originally intended for Akens at all. The song was first offered to both Sam Cooke and Earl Grant, who both turned it down. When Akens recorded it, he did so as a last-minute addition to an album session when they needed one more track. The record company had such low expectations for the song that they initially released it as a B-side. Only when DJs began flipping the record and playing The Birds and the Bees instead did Era Records rush to reissue it as an A-side. This accidental hit went on to sell over 1 million copies and earned Akens a gold record. Hold Me, Thrill Me, Kiss Me by Mel Carter, who began his career in the late 1950s as a gospel and R&B singer before transitioning to the pop market in the 1960s.
Thinking this is the last you'll find.
Born in Cincinnati, Ohio in 1939, Carter signed with Sam Cooke's Derby Records at the beginning of his career, with Cook serving as something of a mentor. What's rarely discussed about Hold Me, Thrill Me, Kiss Me is that it was actually a cover version of a song originally recorded by Karen Chandler in 1952. This practice of white artists covering songs previously performed by black artists was common in the 1950s and 60s, often resulting in the white version receiving more airplay and commercial success. Though Carter himself was African American, his version was deliberately produced to appeal to the white pop market, reflecting the complex racial dynamics of the music industry at that time. Carter's smooth delivery and the lush orchestral arrangement of Hold Me, Thrill Me, Kiss Me helped it to rise to number 8 on the Billboard Hot 100 in 1965. Despite this success, Carter's recording career waned as musical taste shifted later in the decade. He pivoted to acting, appearing in films and television shows including Sanford & Son and Dreamgirls. In more recent years, Carter has written books about his experience in the entertainment industry and has been inducted into the West Coast Doo-Wop Hall of Fame. Though he never again achieved the same level of chart success, his signature song has endured as a classic of the era, frequently appearing in films and commercials. A fascinating detail about the recording of Hold Me, Thrill Me, Kiss Me involves its production. The session was produced by Jimmy Bowen, who would later become one of the most powerful executives in country music. The lush string arrangement was crafted by H.B. Barnum, a pioneering African-American arranger who worked with everyone, from Frank Sinatra to Aretha Franklin. The recording was completed in just 2 takes, with Carter's vocal performance on the first take being deemed perfect but containing a technical error. The second take is what listeners hear on the record. The studio musicians who played on the track were part of the legendary Wrecking Crew, the unsung heroes behind countless hits of the era who rarely received credit on the recordings. 1965 was a year when music both reflected and shaped the rapidly changing world. If you enjoyed this musical time capsule, make sure to subscribe for more journeys through the soundtrack of our lives. Until next time, keep those records spinning.